Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking to Renate Reinsve all about sentimental value. And one of the things that I think must be so interesting to explore in a character like Nora for this movie is the fact that you get to really see these facets of her creative process and who she is as an actress, and particularly how does she work on a script? What does she look like in rehearsal? How does she perform on stage? And how did you figure out which pieces of yourself you wanted to bring into those moments of the movie versus what you felt would be really different for her?
Yeah, I feel very alike in that sense that I've always used my profession as an actor to understand something about my life or try to actually find uh some nuance and complexity to a situation, and then I actually get to play it out. So you actually get to understand something, and then if it's been someone I know that I don't understand, I can use them. Or if there's like a conflict that I don't understand, I can kind of use that to give it meaning. And I feel uh, I understood that kind of early, and I think Nora understands that she's doing that as well. But on some level, she doesn't, because to 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 have a good performance, you have to access so much of you, all the things you don't like also. And when she gets to that threshold and is supposed to be on stage, she just panics and runs away and gets people to slap her and to kind of get out of it, and rips off her dress because it's too much to go into that space. And I really love just that launch of that character, that her core problem is actually being in contact with herself is impossible because it's so much confusion about it and so much unprocessed things. And then when she finally is physically pushed on stage, you see where she gets her force, and that is all those things that is living within her that she hasn't been able to communicate.
I've heard you say that you kind of imagined that she became an actor in part because it was a way to feel closer to her father, who's obviously a director in the story. And particularly that opening sequence, like you said, where she needs someone to slap her and she's trying to physically rip the dress off of herself. You see how physically she feels those emotions. And so, how
Yeah.
did that idea of the relationship with her father, even when he's not present, play into that whole sequence for you?
Well, the first scene that she does in that, when she gets on stage, is screaming to a man, a father figure. That is not totally unlike Stellan. So she has a lot, you can see her anger. And I think she has subconsciously become an actress because her sister acted in one of his movies, and she really wants his recognition, but very subconsciously. So when he actually comes and offer her a role, she takes control when she says no. It's her way of having integrity and taking control. But I don't, what I really loved about this character is to kind of just play around with how much she knew about herself and the situations that comes up. Like what is she conscious about, and what is she not conscious about? So that was really fun to build her inner world. And I think also for her, it wasn't just her thing she was carrying. It was also transferred from previous generations, trauma in her family that she carried that she couldn't fully understand, which is true. So no, it was so much to play around with in this character.
There is, and I also think it's so interesting how there's such a push and pull with her dad. You know, when he first shows up at their mother's wake and she doesn't know that he's going to come, and she hears his voice, one of her fears is, what if he feels like he needs to comfort us?
Yeah.
And what did you find in playing someone who wants to be so close to their dad, but also has this fear of, what if he tries to be my dad right now? Because we don't know what that relationship looks like.
Yeah, I think she really, really wants that connection, and she wants to be close to him, but then the resentment and the anger comes in her way every time. It's just triggered when she's in the same room. And then her defense mechanism is kind of putting on this I don't need him kind of fence. But I definitely think that she would need him. And it's one of the reasons why she struggled to be in relationships in her life, is because of she hasn't really been close to him uh, her whole life. So but so much, I think she misunderstand her anger herself. I think she really feels entitled to that anger, but it's actually just punishing herself. And I feel during the movie she will learn more about that anger. That is, it's hopeful the way I don't want to, of course, say too much, but uh, the acceptance of the complexity with that anger is kind of what changes in her.
You're so right. And there's that one scene that you and Stellan have together that shows the idea of what their relationship could have been if it wasn't for all that anger when
Yeah,
they're smoking outside. And I
yeah.
love the laughter that she's so amused at the fact that he gave his grandchild, her nephew, the piano teacher, a cinematic education when he's like 8 years old. And how did the two of you want to really use that scene to communicate all of that? Because it's not in the dialogue at all in that moment either.
Yeah, we were so sad after doing that scene because it felt so nice. It was the first scene that me and Stellan did together that had hope and had that warmth and love. And leaving that, we knew we were going into something more heavy after. And it was just, it's such a little glimmer of light. And we actually asked Joachim to write us more of those scenes. But of course, they didn't belong in the movie. But we were sad we didn't have more of those.
And there's a lot about her trying to realize that she does have a maternal instinct and she is able to be a caretaker to other people, and her kind of growing to recognize that through her relationship with her sister. But I
Mm.
love all the interactions that she has with her nephew throughout, because you see that she is that person to him. And how did
Yeah,
you want to use those scenes to kind of explore something that's so great about her, but that she doesn't fully recognize or see in herself yet?
right. And I think that's one of the things that she didn't see, right? That I loved playing with, that she has this identity, this set identity that she can't take care of anyone, and she couldn't have a kid because she's not able to, and then she doesn't see herself with her nephew. They're just having so much fun, and she just loves being with him, and she can't see that from the outside. And also with her sister, she's had this story all her life that she wasn't able to take care of anyone. And then when her sister says that I had you, that sentence, she understands for the first time that she is actually capable. And then that kind of is a catalyst for how she views that anger in later in the movie.
And also because she's the older sibling, there's this feeling of, I should be the one that has my life together. I should be a few steps ahead of you. And yet she keeps looking at everything that her sister has and feeling like, why haven't I been able to build this for myself? And
Yeah.
how did you want the sibling relationship to really reflect the things that she wishes she could build or she wishes that she was capable of?
Yeah, I really love that. That is like a subtle kind of vague veil on the relationship, but it's not like a strong jealousy, or it's not that she wants that taken away from her sister. It's just that she sees her life in a different perspective when she's with her sister. And I love that. It's so true how things can be like evoking in you in different people, and you don't really know why. And it can be really uncomfortable, but she loves her sister so much and only want the best for her, but still she feels like she's failing every time she meets her like a tiny way in the back of her head. That's what she feels.
I mean, I love what you said and you described is so true about she doesn't want anything to be taken away from her sister, but there are little inflections of the
Yeah.
childhood versions of themselves when her sister's been clearing everything out of the house and doing all the work. And the one thing she points out is a vase that
Yeah.
Nora then goes, oh, I quite like that. I'm going to take this. And her sister's like, well, of course. And how did the two of you kind of just find those little inflections of this is what they were like when they were kids as well?
Yeah, when you have to play out something that you don't necessarily respect in other people. So Nora is like she hasn't done anything in that house. And I understand, I'm not judging. She has all this history, but it's so rude how she has just like gone out of that responsibility that they both have. And then she also is like she's a little oblivious to that. She's sometimes a little entitled, and then um yeah, and then when she takes the vows just because her sister points it out, it's yeah, it's very funny. I can recognize that in my relationship with my sister.
And when you were playing that sequence of scenes, what did you find in Nora when she first walks into the house? Because it's that feeling of absence, and this used to be where our mother was, and just looking at the chair and seeing the empty chair sitting there as well.
Yeah, I think she expects coming there with and feeling nothing, and then it's a very confusing feeling that arises in her seeing the chair that her mother used for therapy sessions. And I think just the whole, it's a very physical, like the mise-en-scène that Joachim builds in the whole scene where she first comes in and see the chair after she met her sister, and then looking at the house and they're talking about the possibility of living there, and then seeing how much responsibility Agnes have taken in the house and that Nora has backed out. It says so, just the positions and how they have related to the house says so much about their relationship and about them, both of them as character. So no, it was just, I remember Joachim just showing me the scene physically, and I remember it just informed me with so much that it was kind of just easy to go through it because it would just all the emotions would just come in that mise-en-scène.
And like you said with the chair, that's where her mother would see her patients, and her mom was
Yeah,
a therapist. And it's interesting that she has an aversion to the idea of therapy, particularly with her mental health struggles. And she'd rather just talk to her sister and it feels safe and comfortable because she's
yeah.
not ready to confront a lot of it. But how did you feel like that also played into certain things that it told you about her relationship with her mother or how she viewed her?
Yeah, I think because I think she knows that if she goes in and starts processing things, it's just too much. And it would probably be years of something very, very heavy. So I think she's trying to tell herself that she doesn't need it. It's okay. I can, but she knows, I think that it's because on some level she knows it's because it would be too much to handle. She thinks that at least.
Yeah.
Mm.
And in her relationship with her dad, asking her to do this part in his script and saying no to him and having that boundary, it's also that thing where she also doesn't know how she feels about someone else taking it on. And so but I thought it was really lovely in the conversation that Nora has with Rachel, with Elle Fanning's character, that
Mm.
when Rachel has doubts, she says, my father is a really difficult person, but he's a wonderful director and he clearly sees something in you, and you shouldn't walk away from this. Like, you should stay with the project. And
Yeah.
I was interested in kind of like what you found in how Nora feels in that moment, because she's kind of saying things that maybe she also doesn't fully believe herself either.
Yeah, and we tried different versions of that scene. We tried a version where Nora met Rachel in the hallway before they have the conversation, struggling because she is jealous. And we try then gradually going to towards warmth, and that is more interesting. It's more interesting that they want the best for each other, but it's difficult. It's more complex if you have someone that really are good people, but they are just hindered by grief or anger, or but it just blocks parts of um, how they choose and how they should live their lives. So I remember we did the rehearsal and we thought, oh, this is a very complicated scene and we can do it different ways. And then we did test a lot of versions in when we shot it.
And because all of this opens so much of, clearly cycles that she's been through before in her emotions, and we start to understand more why her withdrawing a little bit or being quieter or not returning her sister's phone call is something that her sister finds so scary to experience. And how did you kind of use the rehearsal process where you weren't necessarily kind of acting out through the scenes, but really discussing them in depth? How did you use that time to really figure out the subtlety of that which builds throughout the film?
Yeah, I think to just be very, very specific. I remember going into that scene where Agnes, the sister, comes to Nora to actually propose that she reads the script because the father might have seen more about them than they know. And then Nora was in the lowest state that she has been in the movie, but and it's a scary thing to go into because it's not so active, so you don't have so much to play with. But to it was scary also to um trust kind of the dynamic between the sisters would tell the story. So to go into something that wasn't so active and that she, of course, we had prepared a lot for knowing exactly what these things, these small signals in both sisters meant to each other. So how Nora would try to hide her state and how um, Agnes would see the little things and then be very truthful and not try to show anything, but really be in that kind of analysis that we did, and then be very subtle about it. Yeah, it was just built very specific. And I think if it's like all the thoughts and all the little nuances of their relationships are built really specific, then you're able to be very free and open in the scene as well.
And it also kind of follows that conversation that she has with her dad, where, he's trying to say the right things, but he's saying all the wrong things. But it also opens up so many things for her in what he says about, you should be a mother, you should have a child, and her fear of that, not believing that she can do it, and the things that he says in terms of her career. And so knowing that moment was coming after with her sister, how did you want her reactions in that scene to her dad to feel like part of the catalyst for where it then takes her to?
Yeah, actually, I think it was a little bit different in the edit than it was in the script, because I think she was confronted there with a lot of very deep things, and all the things that she wanted her father to see in her was kind of like just put down in one conversation, him being really clumsy, but really also hitting like the really bullseye of what her biggest fear is, to not be able to have that and not have the ability to have that. So um, there was also a part that's now not in the movie anymore, but I think it was a lot of things happening at the same time where Nora just stumbles down into the kind of darkness she ends up in. But so I feel a lot of the movies also like made in the edit in that process. I don't know what else to answer in that actually. Yeah, I don't know.
No, I love those details. And,
Yeah.
there's also that moment where she desperately wants that recognition for her dad in coming to her theater opening. And, he says he's going to, and then he doesn't show up in that moment. And
Yeah.
again, that's one of the trigger points for her emotionally as well, because she has such a history of feeling like he's never there for her. And what felt important to you when you were filming all those scenes where everybody's coming up to her and she's surrounded by people, but she feels completely isolated and alone?
Yeah, it's what you said actually. That is also kind of the answer. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I love that. And
Yeah.
you were touching earlier a little bit about how through the relationship that we see her try to have, we understand so much about her as well, because it's the idea that she even says out loud, you being
Yeah.
married is easier because I can't handle a real relationship. But then him and his wife separate, and that kind of changes things. And it's almost surprising to see her be the one to try to push it forward and get rejected by him. And what did you feel like it created in her to have that sense of rejection from someone as she's trying to put herself forward in a different way?
I think it can be read two ways. I think she's so scared of actually going into something. It's both a relief, and I think it's also um yeah, it's something hopeful. Maybe this could work. So I think it's both at the same time. And because it is easier for her with that distance, it's scary that he's might get closer, but when he actually ends up rejecting her, I wanted I know that I wanted it to read as both a relief and also a something kind of like falling down in her because of the dynamic with what she knew about herself and what she didn't know about herself. So that she thought she didn't want that relationship, but that at some level she really do want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a point later in the film where her dad gets taken into the hospital and her sister show up. And it was really sweet to see how tender Nora is with her father at that moment, even just like the hand on his face and holding his hand and the way she sits down. And you kind of sense that she sees him in this really vulnerable state, and it changes her perspective of him a little bit to see that side of him. And how did you feel like that changed things for her a little bit in their relationship and the way that it moves forward?
I think it's also because he didn't see her. So because he wasn't awake, she could actually, you could see her be as longing for his attention and for his love as she actually was. But if he had opened his eyes, and she would be scared and angry for what he could come out of his mouth and be on guard. But you see her actually being that child wanting that recognition. So it's not necessarily that something changed for her there, but it's actually what's underneath her, yeah, her everything she's going through with her father.
Yeah. And when he does wake up, her and her sister are outside of the room, but as they walk back, they see him immediately flirting with one of the nurses. And
Yeah,
instead of being angry, they kind of laugh instead, like, oh, that's our dad. He's back. And
yeah,
how did
yeah.
you want that just to feel like something that, could have made her feel angry in a different setting, but in this moment is the thing that kind of breaks them into laughter?
Yeah, I think they've been so scared that he will actually go away. And I think that's a big fear of if you're so it's so complicated with someone, and then you end up not being able to have that conflict resolved in any way. It's also, I think, very scary, because then you will have to live with what you didn't do and how you didn't try to find it in yourself and the other person, some kind of reconciliation. So I feel that's kind of a relief. That's the first time she's not really angry. And it's also after the moment where she realized she's actually able to love. And that is her biggest fear, that she or be able to take care of someone else. And that because that fear is now gone, she's learned that she can. That's also kind of makes her lighter.
Yeah. I also think it's such a beautiful choice that Joachim made, where we don't see the reconciliation conversation, but we see the aftermath of it. So we understand
Yeah.
exactly what that conversation would have looked like. But
Mhm.
what did you envision that as of, what are the things that they probably said to each other that helped to repair it for her to be able to say yes to being in his film finally?
You know what? I don't think they talked. I think that because she understood with her sister that she did take care of her, and she suddenly understand that she's able to that, so she hasn't lost anything with the relationship with her father being so difficult. She has it, and that is the biggest relief she could ever feel, and that the anger kind of goes away a little bit, and she's just able to say yes. But I don't think they need to talk, because also when she reads the script, she also sees how much he has understood about her. So it's both of those things, I think, just makes her go into the project, and the project itself is the conversation.
It's such a great point, and it also makes sense as to why when we see her shooting that final scene of his movie, they never need to exchange a word. Was that part of kind of what felt so natural as part of the conversation of there's all these things that they don't need to say to each other, but they have said it now?
I think that that is the movie, and the project is that conversation. And then I think when they cut that scene, she suddenly just discovers in his eyes that he is also just a little boy searching for his mom, wanting some recognition from his mom. And that's kind of the same that she is doing. So it's kind of they see each other as the same. And he has understood something about his life, seeing the scene played out by his daughter, who is the only one who could do it in his eyes. So I think they just learned so much in that moment about each other and their own life. And that's what those gazes contains.
You're so right with that description and with the idea that she recognizes in that moment that her dad is just a little boy still wanting his mom to see him and to be there for him,
Yeah.
knowing that that's the end point of that one take entire sequence of scenes that you're filming. How did that play into the way that you imagined Nora stepping into this role? Because you're essentially being asked to perform this really pivotal scene for a project where the rest of the project doesn't necessarily exist for you as an actor.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel it was so filled with the whole, we shot it chronologically. So I feel it was so filled with everything that we've done and all the conversation about these relationships and where they came from. So it wasn't, I never really thought about that I didn't know the rest of the movie. It was just so clear to me what that story was and what that meant to both Gustav and Nora.
And in talking a little bit more about the pivotal conversation that she has with her sister, I love that it was something that you didn't want to rehearse to kind of save that moment for discovery. And, that's what leads to Agnes climbing into the bed with her and saying, I love you, which weren't details in the script. And what were some of the things that you really found in the moment from saving the performance until you were filming it together?
Well, we did actually rehearse it and that was kind of a scene that I did a lot because I was helping also with the audition process. So I think the you could call it like saving, but it's more like you build something and we were all really nervous. So when we got to that scene, it just kind of the way Joachim works is you build a very strong foundation and very detailed foundation. And then when you're there, you just actually try to explore the scene, what it is. You just forget what it is. You go back to zero and then you kind of just let it happen. And then the whole room is so tuned into that scene. So it didn't feel like it was me and Inga improvising anything. It was the whole room improvising and really trying to tell the story of those two sisters. And everyone had their personal experience to the story, and everyone on set was so kind of emotionally leaned in. So and that is also what Joachim does. He wants those events, he call them. He wants something to occur. You don't necessarily have to understand it in the moment, but if you have felt something and something was truthful and something changed or happened in a scene, he can use it in the edit. So that scene was kind of because that happened and it was so real what happened and it kind of just occurred on set. He used that in the edit and then he built the structure around that scene, especially in that phase of the or stage of the movie.
No, it's so wonderful because it's such a beautiful scene and it feels so emotionally impactful, just like the rest of the film. So thank you so much for talking all about it. Really appreciate it, Renata.
Thank you for having me.